Do you like custom bikes, Discovery Channel shows, memes, or the guys from the Teutul family? If you do, then you were probably hooked on the iconic show American Chopper just like the rest of the world. You're also probably a fan of Paul Teutul Jr. If you didn't watch the show, then you must have at least seen the meme picture from the show dubbed American Chopper Argument all over social media. Anyone who watched the show and knows anything about motorcycles will readily tell you how talented and proficient the cast is when it comes to building custom choppers. And while we can all agree that they're pretty good at what they do, we can also agree that they are pretty good at something else: drama.
This thing. We're involved here. Let me tell you something. Listen, if I wasn't involved, this go to it would burn to the days of death. You know what? Get the out of here. And don't bother coming in tomorrow because you're terminated.
Like every other family, the Teutul family has their fair share of disagreements and arguments, although one argument turned out to be the biggest family feud to come out of a show. The infamous fight between father and son, Paul Sr. and Jr. would lead to a lawsuit, a global uproar, a viral meme, and the eventual exit of Paul Jr. from his father's shop. Besides being a meme star, what became of Paul Teutul Jr.? What does he do these days? Glad you asked. Welcome to TUNANOCRUST. In today's video, we'll be spilling the beans on everything from his business to his personal life as well, so stay tuned. We'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes and members across 150 countries who come together to find inspiration and take the next step in their creative journey. Skillshare has helped us so much by connecting us to people who have classes about video editing and Photoshop masters, who have helped constantly improve the videos we put out. Have a specific skill you're trying to learn? Skillshare is the perfect place to start. From photography and illustration to graphic design, freelancing, and more, you can find classes that will match your goals and interests. The variety of different classes to explore is endless. Take this class as an example: how to sketch, draw, and design cars like a pro. You probably never knew you could do that, did you? Skillshare can help you make 2022 a year of new learning, growth, and connection through creativity. Now is your time to try Skillshare. The first 1,000 people to use my link in the description box will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare Premium. The best part is Skillshare is ad-free, so you can stay in the zone while you're exploring new skills. Now, let's get back to the video. The soon-to-be Discovery Channel blockbuster show American Chopper debuted on TV in 2002. The series managed to put out a total of 6 seasons within a time frame of 7 years. Within the running showtime, some of the best creations from Orange County choppers included the robot bike, Black Widow, and the Comanche. For years, Paul Jr. did the work with his father and younger brother Michael, also known as Mikey. He participated in the designing and building process of some of the motorcycles that were featured on the show and many others that were not. However, after a huge fight between Paul Sr. and Paul Jr., which was televised, Paul Jr. exited the series in 2009, and in January 2010, the beloved show was eventually canceled.
Design something on this bike that's more girlyish or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. See, he has no thought process, so he has nothing to add to the situation.
But I got the initiative to know that that's got to be done, and you don't.
What we got to do.
You don't.
And he just said he just wants it to happen.
And you don't.
You make it happen every
you don't
time.
have enough, and you do for it.
Really?
Yeah.
You got an awfully nice house for what I did. You got an awfully nice house for what I did.
The court case. Paul Jr. sued for $1 million. Typical family disagreements rarely end in the courtroom, but with the Teutul family, the case proved to be very different than your average family bickering. After Paul Jr. was fired, TLC filed a notice of default due to Jr.'s absence. According to their contract, specific members of the Orange County Chopper shop had to remain on camera by being employed. So, in response to the notice filed by TLC, Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. decided to make a new contract, one in which Paul Jr. would be an independent contractor, and it worked. TLC was pleased and off their backs. However, the relief didn't last long, as Paul Jr. managed to only last a couple of months as a contractor. Since Paul Jr. actually co-founded Orange County Choppers, he owned 20% of the company shares, which his father wanted to buy out from him. Following the new contract, Paul Sr. could buy Jr. shares at a fair market price, which would be determined by a neutral party. The already tense relationship between the father and son didn't make it easy for them to settle out of court, and Paul Sr. chose to take his son to court rather than give him the good old fatherly talk instead. Things became very ugly from then on. Paul Sr. sued his son for $1 million in damages in a bid to push Paul Jr. into selling his shares. However, Paul Jr. fought back his father's contractual option with a countersuit in which he charged his father with corporate waste, in other words, fraud. After several endless courtroom sessions, Paul Jr. lost the case in 2011 and was forced to sell his shares to his father. Although no one knows exactly how much Paul Jr. received, it clearly wasn't enough to fund his own business afterward. So, what does Paul Teutul Jr. do these days? Since we're still talking about shares, let's go over what happened to Paul Jr. in terms of business. Quite the opposite of popular opinion, Paul Jr. didn't get right back to working in the chopper building industry after leaving Orange County Choppers. In 2009, he founded a company, Paul Jr. Designs, which was dedicated to making inexpensive steel camp stoves. When asked why he took such a different route in terms of business, Paul Jr. shared that it was very difficult for him to take back control of his life after working for his father for such a long time. He assured that his decision to build stoves shouldn't be surprising given his background and experience as a steel builder. The truth about his decision was soon revealed. Turned out that due to his past contract with Orange County Choppers, he was unable to get back into the bike business. This meant that he could no longer build or design any choppers for an entire year following his termination. However, by April 2019, Paul Jr. was able to flip his stove business into a bike body shop, and it has been shooting for the moon since then. At that time, it was estimated that Paul Jr. was worth a chilling $2 million. In 2016, Paul Jr.'s business reached impressive new heights when he completed 2 bikes for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows summer blockbuster, and he managed to do it all without any concept art. Although he was originally contracted to complete just 1 bike for the movie, the directors asked for a second one because of how much they liked the first. In 2021, the business reached yet another groundbreaking milestone when it collaborated with Rough Cycles, a German bicycle manufacturer, to create a PJD electric bicycle. The new e-bike collection was completely different from anything the 2 companies had ever worked on before, and it showed Paul Jr.'s creativity in a positive new light. Beyond the past drama between the Teutul's, Paul Jr.'s professional life has been thriving in all aspects. These days, the company actively takes part in nationwide automotive events and exhibitions, while receiving consistent commissions from chopper-loving customers. Paul Jr. is now an innovator within the chopper industry, and with his unique designs, there is no doubt that he will continue to succeed in the years to come. What about his personal life? In August 2010, Paul Jr. wedded his longtime girlfriend and model, Rachel Beister. Even though Paul Sr. was invited, he never showed up. In 2015, Paul Jr. and his wife Rachel welcomed their first child and son, Hudson Stephen. In a recent interview, Paul Jr. candidly expressed his faith. He clearly wasn't joking, as he is an active member of many Christian ministries and has even participated in speaking engagements alongside his wife before. He is also available for booking as a Christian speaker and heavily incorporated his faith in his book, The Build: Designing My Life of Choppers, Family, and Faith. Aside from this, Paul Jr. shares a considerable part of his personal life on his social media and business website. What about his relationship with his father? Before we find out what later happened to the feuding father and son, if you enjoyed this video so far, please let us know by clicking the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on the bell notification so you never miss an upload. Back to the video. With a tremendous amount of effort, the Teutul's were able to amend their relationship, or at least make it workable through the years. The decision to leave behind their historical feud and choose peace brought about positive results. And in 2018, the father and son made an appearance together in The Return of American Chopper.
You know, Paul Jr. is back, on the show. Your son is back. I noticed he's not here today, but how has that been? Has that been what you expected it would be, being reunited with him on the show?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of an adjustment, because it had been a long time, and the junior senior thing was horrible as far as I'm concerned. I'm glad that part of my life is over with, and I think he is too. So he has his own business. I have my own business, and I think it's good because I think our downfall was being in business together.
The series was, however, canceled in 2019. Paul Jr. made a TV comeback in 2020 for a 2-hour special, The Last Ride. In the special, he worked with his father for the first time in years to build a new chopper for a big company. The special also marked the first collaboration between Paul Jr. Designs and Orange County Choppers, which made it the perfect chance to get rid of any lingering animosity between the Teutels. A while later, Paul Sr. shared that he and his son had an eye-opening discussion which proved to be the last step in resolving their differences. Realizing that the core of their problems involved work and business, both men chose not to work together in the same shop even though they might be able to team up for projects. Eventually, the Teutels reconciled, but it took quite a while and a lot of effort on both parties for them to forgive each other and move on. Today, both parties get along just fine. Seems to be the perfect ending for a global feud that produced a viral meme, doesn't it? Well, if you know the Teutels, then you know one thing for sure. The story is far from over. If you enjoyed today's video, let us know by smashing the like button. Who has the better shop, Orange County Choppers or Paul Jr. Designs? What do you think Paul Jr. will do next? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.